This is Joe McHugh. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I would like to chat with you a little bit about qualified immunity. So again, my name is Joe McHugh, and I'm your liberty-minded independent candidate for President of the United States, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. You probably agree that our government is corrupt, and therefore our leaders are compromised. I mean, how else can we explain, everything that's happening in the world and so little action happening on the legislative side to fix it? To restore liberty in America, we got to start with fresh politicians who have little or no connection to the status quo. It's the only way we're going to get things done. And it's been a long time since we've had liberty in America. So let's do a quick refresher. Liberty is clean air, fresh water, healthy food, money that retains value over time, and a constitution that is applied evenly to all people, without exception, by default. Now, today we're going to cover some of the updates of the campaign and to reintroduce myself as a candidate, as well as the platform. So the agenda specifically is to cover ballot access first. Secondly, to cover the update to the cabinet, specifically to announce a new preferred running mate, which I'm hoping to recruit her as my VP. And thirdly, to talk a little bit about why we as a ticket are better for the Democratic nomination than the Biden and supposedly Val Demings ticket. Okay, so just to give you a quick recap, I am a serious candidate. We have actual ballot access. We will be on the ballot in Utah in November as an independent. We will also be on the ballot in Colorado in November as an independent. We have 25% of the signatures needed to get on the ballot in New Jersey. We still have another month to collect it, but with coronavirus, that's making it extremely difficult. We have about 25% of the signatures needed in Tennessee, but we ran up against some voter suppression issues. At least that's my opinion. We turned in enough signatures, and they invalidated 73% of the total signatures. And these people said that they were voters, registered voters. So that to me says, portends a problem. In any case, we have made ourselves available on the Democratic ticket as well to participate in the primary should the Democratic voters choose to go in another direction other than VP Biden as the nominee. And if it looks like we're not going to win, we can always withdraw from the primary in order to maintain our independent status with Colorado and Utah. Now, with that said, I believe that the Democratic Party has a choice to make here. They can choose to either the status quo over the last 50 years, which has led us to where we are today, or we can choose to listen to the people who have taken to the streets in protest over the injustice at the hands of police and at the hands of government in general, and basically just government that has gotten way out of control and has zero accountability to the people. Now, Vice President Joe Biden is not the right candidate for this moment. He stands opposed to qualified immunity, and that's a critical issue that's needed in order to restore liberty in America. So I'm at the top of the ticket. I've been working since I'm a Marine Corps officer, a veteran, an entrepreneur with a background in economics and finance, and I've been on the campaign trail since October, doing whatever has to be done, as any Marine would, oftentimes sleeping in the car because I don't have the money to sleep in hotels and fly all over the country like some of these established candidates. So I've traveled to Colorado, Utah, Iowa, South Carolina, all over the place. I'm now here broadcasting from Tennessee, and I'll soon be going back up to Michigan shortly to tap into my base from 2014 and 2002 to see if they would like to put up lawn signs and record videos. Now, I first committed to politics as a teenager after observing every single night the same thing happened over and over again. Black families were getting systematically dismantled at the hands of the crack epidemic and the laws that were put in place to break up the families and put black men behind bars and subject black women to the needs of the state in order to care for the family. Now, at this time in Detroit, General Motors had dismantled the public transit system, and the big box stores had left the city. And so that in education, the schools were failing. And there was something called a pipeline, a school to prison pipeline that a lot of people were talking about that resulted in, still today, results in 1 in 3 black men ending up in prison at some point in their lives. Now, to me, when I asked that question to my parents, why is this happening? They said, well, we don't know, Joe. And to me, that wasn't acceptable. And that's when I decided I was going to commit to running, or not to commit to running, but to commit to fighting the good fight. And I figured it had something to do with money, so I made a career in money. And that has led me to where we are today in terms of campaigning for president as a Marine Corps officer and as an entrepreneur and author, because whoever's in the system right now got there by participating in a corrupt system. And so in order to fix the system, we need to elect somebody who's truly an outsider. Now, with the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Rayshard Brooks, and how little that has been done as a result of this, it's just, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing that nothing has been done. You would think that there would have been legislation in both the House and the Senate to take action specifically. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, I thought the Justice and Policing Act and the other bill, the 2 bills that were passed, or rather proposed in both the House and the Senate, you're saying I thought they were supposed to be good. Well, they're mostly window dressing. Unless you address the fact that government officials are above the law, and that they are above the law because of something called qualified immunity, we will not regain control over our government until we repeal that Qualified Immunity Act. And so not only now there were 2 people actually that Representatives Amash and Presley, who proposed Qualified Immunity Act to end Qualified Immunity Act, and that bill in particular has gotten very little traction. In the Senate, it was Senators Warren, Sanders, and Markey who proposed to end qualified immunity, and their bill has gotten very little traction as well. And so really, clearly our system is corrupt and it's full of compromised officials. That's the only way I can explain it, and I think you probably agree with that. So let's explore what qualified immunity actually is. Okay, so qualified immunity is a legal doctrine that was created in 1982 by the Supreme Court, and it places government officials above the law, specifically by requiring the government officials to, quote, to laws that are, quote, a reasonable person to know. That, in other words, when the government official is breaking the law or violating our constitutional rights, they are only going to be subject to punishment if we, the prosecution, the plaintiffs, the people who have had our rights violated, can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the official should have been in the know on how they're violating our rights, on the grounds that a reasonable person would have known that. Now, that's a problem. And the reason why is that because this is an unfortunate perversion of the 1926 Void for Vagueness Amendment, which was a constitutional rule that required that the average American understand, or rather that the laws be clear, objective, and easily understood by the average American in order for the laws themselves to be considered constitutional. Now think about that for a second. If we don't understand the law, according to this doctrine in 1926, that law itself would be deemed unconstitutional. And the reason why is because Justice Sutherland, who ended up graduating from Michigan Law School and started his practice in Utah, he wrote in his opinion that it would be a violation of our Fifth Amendment right to due process to subject people to laws that we do not have a reasonable chance of understanding. So therefore, all the laws that are in place today that are complex and confusing are de facto unconstitutional according to the 1926 rule, which makes this Qualified Immunity Act even more frustrating. It's just mind-blowing. So let's pause and consider exactly what this means for a second. Every American, the average American, okay, so the vast majority of America is supposed to understand every law on the books, or at least have have the opportunity to understand it. In other words, the laws need to be so clear, so straightforward and objective and easily understood that once you were told the law the average American would understand that. That's how the void for vagueness doctrine is supposed to work. Now today, unfortunately, our laws, again, are so confusing and complex, it's impossible to even know what's against the law. For example, if I spit on the ground right here, that's a felony in some places, a misdemeanor in others. I can go to prison for spitting. So, a lot of these laws need to be repealed. They're out of date. For example, in that situation, there's no victim. There's no victim involved. And so therefore, it shouldn't be a crime at all. So when you consider that government officials and police, college administrators, anybody associated with the government, when you consider that they are above the law and exempt from prosecution for their violations in which they may violate our constitutional right, even though it's specifically spelled out in the Bill of Rights what our rights are. If it's not backed up by law that says that this is clearly a violation, then the government officials can get off the hook. So in other words, they can hide behind the fact that these laws are complex and confusing. Now, if you're a government official and you can hide behind the fact that laws are complex and confusing, that means that they have a vested interest in making sure that laws are complex and confusing, even though they're unconstitutional. And that way they can continue to build their own power and solidify their own status at the expense of everybody else in America. So to restore liberty in America, what we need to do is to repeal qualified immunity to ensure that our elected officials are subject to the same laws as we, the people, are subject to. And we must pass a void for vagueness amendment to require that all laws are clear, objective, and easily understood by the average American. Now, this is easier said than done without the right leadership. And that is why I've updated my cabinet at libertystrikesback.com to reflect a new vice presidential running mate. Now, I want to be clear, she has not agreed to be my running mate. But I believe in America. I believe in you and me. I believe that with the right energy and enthusiasm, that we can actually spread the word and show the world and the Democratic delegates that we offer a better solution, a better path forward than the establishment is providing. And so specifically, that is why I have added Representative Ayanna Pressley, a freshman congresswoman, to the vice presidential post, and Justin Amash as the chief of staff. Now, these are representatives from different parties. Specifically, Representative Pressley is a progressive Democrat. Representative Amash was a former Republican turned independent turned libertarian. And yet, both Representatives Pressley and Amash came together to propose the End Qualified Immunity Act. And they were able to get a number of co-sponsors. Not enough to get the bill passed, but they were going in the right direction. Now, specifically, I think that this is important because what we really need is to cast aside the partisan politics. We need to come together as a team in the name of liberty and justice for all people. And what better way to do that than to go across parties and bring people together in common belief for liberty and justice for all people, as it was written in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. So, a little bit about Representatives Pressley and Amash. Now, Representative Ayanna Pressley, she is a progressive Democrat from Massachusetts. She was the first Black woman elected to the Boston City Council. She was the first Black woman elected to represent Massachusetts in Congress. The first Black woman represented to represent New England in Congress. And not only that, but she is championed in her first term, her first 2 years, she has championed she's championed civil rights with the co-sponsoring of two acts in particular, the End Qualified Immunity Act, which I just mentioned, and the I think it's called the People's Justice Act. And specifically, these are proposals to enhance civil rights, to address the overcriminalization of people, the fact that we have way too many laws on the books. We're creating incentives to put people in prison. We're disenfranchising people, specifically the people in community, women and people of color in particular, and we're taking away their rights, to vote. Black men in particular are more likely to be behind bars than any other group. And once you're behind bars, you're more likely to be on the streets, less likely to get a job, and more likely to lose your right to vote. Representative Presley knows this firsthand. She's married to a gentleman who was behind bars for 10 years. She has the personal experience and the personal convictions to do the right thing and to see it through. Whereas so many other times, you have who you think may be the right person at the top of the ticket, and then you have a CIA operative as vice president. In this particular situation, we wouldn't have that. We'd have alignment across the board. With the president, the vice president, and the chief of staff, we'd be fully aligned to do the right thing for the American people. Okay, the second I want to address Representative Amash's background as well. Now, Representative Amash, because what's important here is personal conviction. And when President Trump violated his oath of office for the umpteenth time, Representative Amash said, enough is enough. And on July 4th of last year in 2019, he left the Republican Party and became an independent. He declared his independence as a representative from the corrupt system and became an independent, and then more recently joined the Libertarian Party to provide them with their first representative at the congressional level. He too, Representative Amash, like Representative Presley, can be counted on to stand upon his beliefs as well. And so for that reason, I believe that we offer a much better alternative than the status quo in which Vice President Biden opposes qualified immunity, and he's leaning towards a police chief who has a questionable record in terms of, there's a lot of issues if you want to dig into Val Demings and the Orlando Police Department for when she was in service. Specifically with Representative Presley as my VP and Justin Amash, who is a constitutional attorney, a constitutional law background as our chief of staff. We would go to work to make sure that all laws are general, equal, and certain, clear, objective, and easily understood by the average American, and so that government officials must abide by the same laws as you and me. That's the objective. And I don't think it's too much to ask. The government needs to answer to the same laws that we answer to. If it's not good enough for them, then it's certainly not good enough for us, and vice versa. So, to that end, ending qualified immunity and passing the void for vagueness amendment, that's how we get there. Those are the key steps. In our next talk, we'll talk about the benefits of replacing the Federal Reserve Bank with a credit union of the United States. My name is Joe McHugh, your independent candidate for President of the United States. And if you know that the two parties have got to go and that you're ready to overthrow the status quo, I invite you to get involved at libertystrikesback.com. Now, if any of you are out there and you'd like to ask a question, I'll open up the floor. Feel free to go ahead and do so. Todd Doug asked me, what do I stand for? I stand for constitutional rights. I can't stand for clean air, fresh water, healthy food, money that holds its value over time. Constitutional rights apply to all people at all times, by default and without exception. I stand for this: the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, which I believe are the most perfect set of documents created in the history and in recorded history for a government. This is my Bible as far as I'm concerned. And when we are sworn into office, I will be taking the oath of office on the Constitution because I believe in separation of church and state. What else do we have? Tim says, vote Joey. Hey, thank you for the support. I appreciate it. And if there are anyone else with any other questions? It looks like that's all we have for right now. So I'll go ahead and end the broadcast. I'm gonna work on another call specifically for the Federal Reserve, converting the Federal Reserve Bank into a credit union of the United States, and how that would benefit us by getting off of oil, out of oil wars, investing in renewables and organics, and splitting the profits with the people instead of with the banks. Again, this is Joe McHugh, your independent candidate for President of the United States. Please join the movement, get involved. tell a friend, go to libertystrikesback.com. Thanks.